Good day, grade 12s. Today we are looking at another proudly South African poem, First Day After the War by Masisi Kunene. So Masisi Raymond Kunene was born on the 12th of May 1930, and he was a South African poet best known for his poem Emperor Shaka the Great. He earned a teaching certificate and an MA at the University of Natal and continued his study of Zulu poetry at the School of Oriental and African Studies. In London, he helped to establish an office of the African National Congress and later became the chief representative of the ANC for Europe and the United States. In 1966, the South African government banned his work, and in 1972 he organized the South African Exhibition Appeal. He was a professor at the University of California, Los Angeles, and Kunene also taught at the National University of Lesotho and the University of Natal. He to South Africa in 1993 following the end of apartheid. In 2005, he was appointed the first South African poet laureate, and Kunene died then in 2006 in Durban after an extended illness. So let's read through the poem together. First day after the war. We heard the songs of a wedding party. We saw a soft light coiling round the young blades of grass. At first we hesitated, then we saw her footprints. Her face emerged, then her eyes of freedom. She woke us up with a smile, saying, "What day is this that comes so suddenly?" We said, "It is the first day after the war." Then, without waiting, we ran to the open space, ululating to the mountains and the pathways, calling people from all circles of the earth. We shook up the old man, demanding a festival. We asked for all the first fruits of the season. We held hands with stranger. We shouted across the waterfalls. People came from all lands. It was the first day of peace. We saw our ancestors traveling tall on the horizon. So I'm wondering if you can try and summarize this for yourself. What does this poem mean to you? If we look at an overview, Masisi Kunene wrote a lot of poetry in South Africa and in the time of apartheid, a period in which black people were discriminated against and oppressed. His poem really describes the joy that people felt at the end of this system of the government. The poem lists a number of ways in which people celebrate the news. The news is so wonderful that we see how people of all types celebrate together and held hands with a stranger. So really we see a lot of acts of jubilation and celebration in this poem. If we then look at the structure and the form, you will notice it is a free verse and there's quite a lot of enjambment throughout. We also see that this highlights or emphasizes the spontaneity and the bubbling euphoria, so that happiness felt by all South Africans. The free verse also emphasizes the unrestrained freedom felt by the people because it's not being restricted by full stops and forced rhyme. So really the form and structure here emphasizes the message very well. If we look overall at the tone, there's definitely a tone of pure joy. It's celebratory and triumphant. This is a poem that celebrates togetherness. So let's delve into a line-by-line analysis. Line 1, we heard the songs of a wedding party. Now, weddings are usually about joining two people. It's a new life that they start together. And here we have two groups. We have black and white that have come together. So here we have a metaphor. Our country is compared to a new bride. A wedding marks the start of a new life for her. And similarly, it is the new chapter for South Africa that is starting. The word songs there suggests happiness and celebration. And the wedding party is symbolic of unity, families coming together. So we know that it is the day after the war had ended, after apartheid had been defeated. The people of South Africa heard the songs of this wedding party, people celebrating. And of course, the wedding party that they are referring to is the unity, the coming together of people, not just two people, but a whole nation. And that is why there is so much celebrations. You will notice that the auditory imagery here of songs appeals to the reader's sense of hearing. Then, line 2 and 3, we saw a soft light coiling around the young blades of grass. So there's soft light that appears at daybreak. That's as the sun is rising. You've seen it. It looks like you can almost touch those golden rays. And this is coiling, it's spiraling around the grass. Now, the grass here is very symbolic. We can identify a very literal and a figurative meaning for this young blades of grass. So literally, we are referring to freshly grown grass. So new grass that is growing. And figuratively, we can refer to the young men that are eager to experience excitement. But we are also referring or extending that first metaphor. The poet compares the young married couple to young blades of grass. Remember, we started off with the wedding party, so obviously there's a couple here, and that is why he's now referring to young blades of grass, these young married people. The married couple are young, like fresh new growth of grass. So the sunlight now creates the symbol of hope and optimism and a tone of peace and calmness. And the glow of happiness on this couple is this sunlight or the light that is surrounding them. This suggests a new dawn, a fresh start for South Africa. I'm giving you a moment to just take the notes or pause here before we continue. So line 4 and 5, at first we hesitated. Then we saw her footprints. Her face emerged. Then her eyes of freedom. Now I want you to imagine in your mind's eye this lady, an African woman, walking through the tall grass. And the first thing that they saw was her footprints. Then she comes through the grass and they see her face. And they focus on her eyes. So to make this a cinematic experience, if you were somebody that's creating a movie, imagine how this would look. Of course, they hesitated because they were in unbelief or doubt. They could not believe that their dream of being free has finally been realized. So of course they hesitated. If I were to tell you tomorrow that you don't have to write the matric exam, we're just going to give you your matric certificate, you've done enough, and you can enroll at university and you already have a bursary, there's somebody that's paying for you, you're also going to hesitate. You're not going to just say, yes, great, let's go, because it sounds too good to be true. And this news also sounded too good to be true. Now, very significantly, we see that the poet or the speaker here mentions her again, and her face, and then her eyes. So who is this mysterious lady that he's referring to? This is a form of personification, right? Freedom is being described as having footprints and a face and eyes, and Kunene portrays the democracy as a character. So democracy is now a woman. She is feminized by the pronoun her. And the footprints, of course, very significant as well. Footprints here can be very literal, meaning that physical imprint or that indentation made in the ground as she's walking, or it can be figurative, meaning the lasting impact of another person's action or words on your life. So they haven't seen freedom yet. They haven't experienced it. But this is the evidence of the freedom that they are about to experience. And then we see that as her face emerges, the reality of freedom becomes clearer, and they saw more evidence of it. So first it was just the footprints, and then they saw a face that they can associate with it, and then the eyes of freedom that can perhaps suggest innocence, right? They say the eyes are the windows to the soul. And then, of course, the freedom that they are referring to here in line 5 is the freedom from apartheid. If we continue with the idea of footprints here, freedom will, of course, leave a mark with us, and that is the effect that they are referring to very figuratively, the effect that apartheid has, and the effect that freedom will have on them. Then very significantly, the speaker refers to her face. Her face is significant here because that is how we identify you, because that is why you have an ID with an ID photo on it, and why you're not allowed to smile or wear strange things. That is how we identify you. So freedom is identified as it emerges, and then on this face we see eyes of freedom that can, again, I'm saying, suggest innocence of the freedom, that it's true. Line 6 and 7, she woke us up with a smile. So now we're carrying forward this personification. Freedom is now waking the people up. So it's almost compared to a mother awakening her children. What day is this that comes so suddenly? The poet compares South Africa under the oppression of apartheid to a long sleep, and democracy is waking up the country from this sleep. And there's a smile, so it's welcoming of nature, this freedom. Day, of course, refers to this new dawn, this new time that they are entering. What day is this? They cannot believe that they are free, and suddenly it feels like it is sudden because it has happened for such a long time that they have been oppressed. So it didn't really just happen in a blink of an eye. It was just because they did not believe that it is true that they use the word suddenly. Now, I want you to pay attention to what is happening in line 8. We said, so it's a reply to what day is this, and we said it is the first day after the war, and that is, of course, a refrain of the title, First Day After the War. And I want you to notice what happens to this line later on in the poem. The war here refers to the struggle against apartheid, and the metaphor that is created here is that apartheid is being compared to a war, and war is unjust and innocent lives are lost, and apartheid was unjust and many lives were, of course, lost. Now in line 9, then without waiting, so they now heard the news, and without waiting we ran to the open space, ululating to the mountains and the pathways, calling people from all circles of the earth. Please notice the enjambment through these lines. They are so excited. It's the same as when I come into your room tomorrow morning and I say, you know what, again, you don't have to go and write matric end exam. I'm giving you R1,000,000. Just go and have a good life. You'll also run and you'll be excited and you'll want to tell the whole family, perhaps, if you trust them with that type of money. Right, so they were free to vent their emotions, and they went into an open space because they were so excited that a closed space would not be able to contain all of this emotion. And they were ululating to the mountains and the pathways. And of course you know what ululating is. So we have this onomatopoeia in the pronunciation of the word ululating, imitating that actual sound of ululation. Okay, so what the dictionary more or less says is wailing or howling. And it's that loud, shrill cry of either sorrow or rejoicing in the African culture. And in this case, we can definitely say it's the sound of rejoicing one hears at like a wedding celebration. And that brings us back to the beginning where we said the sounds of a wedding party. So it really ties up very well with the beginning. Then we have the metaphor. The ululating is compared to an announcement or celebration of freedom. So it's like that was a signal to be heard by all, and that everyone will join in the celebration of freedom from apartheid. Of course, the term circles of the earth there, very significant. It ties up closely with another saying that we have, the four corners of the earth. So this really refers to all the tribes and language groups on the earth. It emphasizes unity. Everyone celebrates together, and really that's what happened at that point in time. The whole world was celebrating, not only a group in South Africa. Everyone was celebrating at the news of this freedom. So again, the poet is appealing to the reader's auditory sense with this ululation and the onomatopoeia that it represents. Then I just want to add to that, we said that the ululation is compared to an announcement or celebration of freedom that I explained to you. And this vivid imagery really displays excitement, the shouting and the celebration. And again, we're returning to, from all these circles, nobody is excluded. This is really a symbol of inclusion. You might be confronted with the terms exclusion or inclusion in the exam. So that is definitely where this would come in, that nobody was excluded from this. Everyone was excited. Everyone was celebrating together because everyone was now being included. Nobody was being excluded anymore. And of course, they were excited. Then line 12, we shook up the old man demanding a festival. Now, every year the old man creates a lot of distress because they always ask you, who can this old man be? And you'll see I'm going to give you a few options. So shook up, they were unsettled, they disturbed. We woke up, perhaps, the old man demanding a festival, right? The old man can be elderly who have been subjected to apartheid for many years. It can be older generations who have endured many disappointments and who are wary of believing this good news. You know, old people, when you want to introduce them to change, they're not keen on it. Then cynics, people who are pessimistic, who are reluctant to embrace the joy of the moment because they think this is too good to be true. Can be old people again who are hard of hearing and they're asleep, and that is why they shook them to tell them the news. It can be a tribal leader who would have been too old to leave the tribal lands and fight for the war against apartheid. Could be Nelson Mandela. So I want you to copy down all of those and bear them in mind, because the questions are worded very specifically and you'll know which one to choose. If not, you can suggest any of those and you'll obviously be asked for a suitable justification of why you're saying it can be that specific person. So a festival was demanded because of the freedoms that they were denied, and now they feel like they deserve this festival. Line 13, we asked for all the first fruits of the season. So many significant things here. So, of course, we have a repetition of the F sound, the alliteration there. This really suggests abundance and emphasizes the significance of the moment. It's also a biblical allusion. It's an expression of gratitude for God's blessings. The first fruits were considered to be offerings brought to God to thank Him in gratitude for what He has given the people. So the idea of responding with gratitude for the advent of democracy is suggested through this. And this is particularly necessary after an experience of hardship enduring the oppressive apartheid regime. So then, of course, we see that they are overwhelmed with joy, prompting this unrestrained physical response. They are almost impulsive in their responses, showing that they are truly happy and showing unity. Right, so I want you to copy down, of course, the season is a metaphor for a new season, and that will be democracy, the season of democracy. Then line 14, we held hands with a stranger. This is considered a reconciliatory action, so meaning like a peaceful action. Of course they were strangers. Here we are referring to not just people who did not know each other, but strangers because they were separated based on the apartheid regime, right? Based on their skin color. So that action of holding hands with a stranger shows unity. The news is so wonderful that we see how people of all types now celebrate together, and there's a wonderful picture depicting exactly that. This is really an effective description of the euphoria, so the joy that people felt after the first free election in 1994, when people from all over the world came to South Africa to celebrate this democracy. Then line 15 and 16, we shouted across waterfalls. Waterfalls being significant here because usually they are considered to be barriers. So it was carried across this. Freedom transcended all barriers. People came from all lands, emphasizing unity. They responded very positively. So previously, apartheid divided the people, but this announcement of the advent of democracy is shared with all neighboring countries across all borders, and this really did have a lot of international implications for South Africa and for other countries as well. Again, we're tying up with the idea of songs and the ululation. Again, we have auditory imagery here that is appealing to the reader's senses. Last two lines. And now, I said to you previously, remember that title, it was the first day after the war. Line 17 now comes, it was the first day of peace. It has changed. It's the same day, but it's a different way of looking at it. They have now accepted this. So we have that repetition that emphasizes the idea of a start of a new era. There's peace that emphasizes unity. Now, a very important line in this poem, you will always be examined on it, is we saw our ancestors traveling tall on the horizon. So you know that the ancestors in African culture plays a very important role, and the alliteration of the T here in traveling tall emphasizes their importance. The capital letter of the A in ancestors does the same thing, also emphasizing their importance. And traveling tall here really means with pride. They are proud. The ancestors are proud of what has been accomplished. They finally find rest from this oppression that they were subjected to. They are relieved and travel into the spirit world with pride. They can now rest because there is peace. Their blood was shed by the injustice of apartheid, and now that injustice is over. Their sacrifices have been awarded. So the spirits of the African ancestors are also known as the Amadlozi, and they play a very important role in the lives of their living descendants. And them celebrating really makes this the climax of the poem, the fact that they are also happy. This ending with the ancestors that are proud really fills the reader with a sense of hope and optimism for the new South Africa. The effectiveness of line 18 is achieved through that image that is created of the spiritual world also coming into play and giving it its seal of approval. And of course, that is emphasized by the alliteration. So I hope that this will help you in answering the questions and preparing for the exam.